Yes, I am painting this Lowe's bucket. I used a plastic promoter, but I wish I would have used the Stix primer. I'm also using a product called Saltwash. It's a texture additive that you can use with any paint. I'm using it with the Wise Owl Chalk Synthesis paint in the color Iron Oxide. I think I initially mixed it in a 1-to-1 ratio, but you'll have to manipulate a little bit of the powder to the paint to figure out how thick you want it to be. I wanted something thick so that it would really build up the texture on this bucket. I am using a chip brush to apply this paint. You'll notice that I am dabbing the paint on at times, and I'm also tapping the side of the brush against the paint. I want to lift some of that texture off, and right here in the close-up you'll see me smooth it back down with the side of the chip brush. You're basically creating what's called a knockdown finish in drywall texturing if you were using joint compound, but this really creates a lot of textured detail. I allowed the paint and the texture to dry overnight before I added the castings made from the Orchid Designs air dry clay and Trimmings mold. I do believe this is Trimmings number 3. It's easier to release the mold if you coat it with a little bit of cornstarch or baby powder, but honestly I couldn't find mine for this video, so I just went ahead and used the air dry clay right out of the package. You'll want to knead the clay a little bit, and then you roll it into a snake and press it into the IOD mold. I didn't start with enough clay, so I have to add a little more. This isn't always a problem, but occasionally you'll find some cracking where you're matching up the clay, so if you can roll enough to begin with, that's always best. Now I'm going to press up from the bottom of the mold to release the clay. This would have been a lot easier had I had the cornstarch or baby powder. Typically you flip the mold over and use gravity to help you get the casting out. As you can see, some of the clay stretched as I removed the casting from the mold. I just trimmed it off in a spot that I thought was easiest to match up later. I'm using Titebond Quick and Thick wood glue. It's the best glue ever to attach this casting to the bucket. Of course, you could use a brush and not your finger to apply the glue, but hey, that's how I do it. You want to apply gentle pressure so that the glue will adhere to the bucket, but not so much that you begin to lose the detail in your air dry clay, because of course it is still wet at this point. That is one of the fabulous benefits of the air dry clay, is that while it is wet, you can manipulate it and put it around curved surfaces like the rim of this bucket. And I'm just repeating the process for casting the molds because I will need to make several of these to get all the way around the bucket. The Trimmings molds are designed with a repeating pattern so that you can overlap to create a continuous trim of whatever length you need. I believe I cast this mold 4 or 5 times to make it all the way around the bucket. Here you'll see me adding that last piece. I cast a piece a little bit longer than what I needed to complete the pot. I wanted to have enough so that I could use the putty knife to cut off the excess. I did stretch the clay a little bit so that it would match up better with the first mold that I cast and glued onto the bucket. It is not a perfect match, but this is a display piece for me, so I wasn't selling it and I'm not worried about it being perfect. I decided to cast this label from the olive crest mold as well, just to add a little extra accent. I did paint in all of my castings that I created with the air dry clay, and I am painting while the clay is still wet. So I do have to be gentle so that I don't lose all my detail. But this will help to prevent some of the cracking that happens with air dry clay. I did have to fill in a few spots after everything was dried, and all you do is add just a touch more clay. I again let this dry completely overnight before I did the next step. In the next step, I'm adding clear wax to seal in the chalk synthesis paint so that I can manipulate the other 2 colored waxes that I intend to put on top. One will be white and one will be a dark wax. It is summer in Louisiana and my shop is very warm, so my clear wax was actually quite liquefied, which made it easy to apply in this situation. When applying the clear wax, make sure that you get into all the crevices in that texture that we created. Wipe off the excess clear wax after it's had a chance to soak in for a few minutes. I also allowed this layer to dry overnight. This step is when everything is going to come together. I'm using Debbie's Design Diary DIY wax in white and Wise Owl's wax in black walnut. You'll notice that I'm applying the white wax with a thick brush, and I am pushing that white wax down deep into the crevices of the casting that I made. I'm doing that because I want to make sure that I leave behind the white wax in those crevices as I wipe off the excess wax here. I'm also not covering the entire pot in white wax because we're going to do some blending with the waxes. My biggest waxing tip that I can give you is to have clear wax and use it as an eraser, which is what I'm going to do right here. The white wax is supposed to mimic the effervescence that happens on these pots, so it's not completely white. I need to take some of that white wax off. That's why I'm using some of the clear wax to erase and to blend into the original color. Now I'm going to use the black walnut wax, and I'm going to start from the bottom because I'm trying to mimic the dirt that may have collected over the years. And now it's really just a matter of layering and kind of finessing where you think the waxes should go. Where would they naturally appear? Some on maybe the top of the rim, some right underneath where those castings are. That's where the pot may have collected some dirt over the years. Remember to use some of your clear wax as an eraser, and it also helps to blend those two colors together. I started applying the white wax in a vertical motion, and I do like the way that turned out better. It mimicked the direction of the drips and caused me to have to do less blending actually. When I do another one, I will probably do it that way from the beginning. So that's really it. You just continue to blend until you're satisfied with it. This was painted to be a display piece in my booth to be an example of what you can do with the products that I sell. I did have some chips as I was moving it over there. So like I said in the beginning, I really wish I would have used the Stix primer instead of that plastic adhesive promoter. I don't think it worked very well. Saltwash is a great primer on its own actually, but on plastic you really need to rough it up first, which I didn't do, add a really great primer, and then the Saltwash is really going to stick. I wouldn't recommend this for outdoor use in the elements, but under a covered porch area I think it would be fine, and certainly indoors it would be fantastic. If you're local, you may have found this video from finding this Lowe's bucket in my booth, which is fantastic. Thanks for playing my game. If you are not local, I suggest that you find your local Wise Owl retailer who also usually sells Saltwash, and an Orchid Designs authorized retailer in your area. It's best to shop local whenever possible because they only sell to small business owners like myself. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, and I hope you learned something helpful from this.